So the moral of the story is, yes, you've got a pretty small window there to regain control, but don't give up, because you can. What's up, Lazy Dog fam? Hope all you are having an awesome day. It is Friday, May 24th here in South Georgia, and it's been a long, hard week trying to get these garden plots back in decent shape after 10 inches of rain the previous week, but we're getting pretty close. We've made a lot of progress this week. So in this video, I want to talk about some strategies for kind of regaining control of your garden when it gets out of control on you, especially when you get a lot of rain. Then we're going to check on our watermelons. Probably need to feed those a little bit, and I got some beautiful sweet corn I want to show you as well. So this week out here in the garden, there's been a lot of hand pulling of weeds going on. There's been a lot of wheel hoeing going on, and I couldn't have done it without my boys. They've helped me a lot. We've been pretty busy. There's been several afternoons where I've been out here from 5 o'clock till 9 o'clock whenever it got dark, just trying to get caught up. And it sure is a good feeling when you finally do get caught up and get everything looking back the way you want it to look. Now, when you get a ton of rain like we've just had and it's really hot outside, man, those weeds are going crazy. And after 3 or 4 inches of rain, it may be tough to get outside in the garden the next couple days and start chipping away at them. So then the weeds are growing faster than you can pull them, and it's really easy to give up. Because when something like this happens, you've really got kind of a small window there to regain control of the situation. If you don't regain control of the situation in that little small window there, then you just kind of got a mess. Some people throw in the towel, some people just roll with it, but it doesn't make gardening near as fun when you've just got a mess of weeds out there and you can't keep up with it. So you really gotta just hammer down for those few days after all that rain and get back control of the situation, and I promise you, you'll feel a lot better. Now, personally, I have a pretty high standard for how my garden should look. I'm as type A can get. Can't do anything about that, just the way I am, but I like my gardens to look nice and neat and clean. Not everybody has those standards, and that's okay. Your garden don't have to look like mine to be productive. It can have weeds in it and still give you plenty of good groceries. But I feel if I'm out here in front of this camera showing you how to grow food in your backyard, I should be showing you something that looks kind of decent. I should be setting a good example. So let's walk around a little bit. I'll tell you kind of my strategy over the last week to kind of regain control of our garden and get things looking somewhat presentable again. So the first thing we did, even when it was still pretty wet out here, is get out here and start hand pulling a bunch of weeds. We had a bunch of weeds in this elephant garlic here. Titus pulled a majority of them. I helped him out a little bit, and now we got it looking pretty clean. Now, this is going to be harvested pretty soon, so those weeds weren't going to hurt anything, but it would have made turnover more difficult. I was going to have to get them out of here at some point anyways, and doing it while the soil was still wet made it a lot easier. So even if your soil is too wet to cultivate, you can still get out there, hand pull some of those weeds that are really close around plants where you maybe wouldn't be able to cultivate anyways. They're a lot easier to pull when the soil's moist. Your soil gets baked over and hard. It's tough to get the root and all. So wet dirt like that may not be good for much, but it's really good for hand pulling weeds. Now, in addition to getting that garlic over there cleaned up, I also wanted to prioritize getting this row of Sharpo Mira taters here cleaned up. Now, these aren't going to be ready to dig for another couple weeks, but we've got a nice little experiment going on here with non-healed plants versus healed plants, and I want to kind of look at the yield on a per plant basis. Hard to do that if we got a bunch of pigweed and morning glory and nutgrass in here like we had, so that's why I wanted to get it cleaned up. A lot easier to look at our results, see what's going on here with this experiment. So we hand pull when the soil's too wet to cultivate, and then as soon as it dries out a little bit to the point where we're not sloshing around making a mess, that's when we want to get the wheel hoe out. That's when we want to get our hand tools out and start doing some light, shallow cultivation. Now, when the soil is nice and dry and we come in here with a wheel hoe or a hand hoe and flip over some of these weeds like that pigweed there or this nutgrass, when the soil's nice and dry, usually these things will be shriveled up and dead by the afternoon. But when the soil is still a little moist, they don't dry out quite as fast. It may not kill them instantly, but it will at least slow them down a little bit and keep them from thriving so much. That's why getting in there as soon as you can, even if it's still a little wet, is very, very important, because you're not going to kill them all, but you are going to slow them down. Now, in addition to slowing those weeds down a little bit, that light shallow cultivation is also going to help things dry out. So after I do that initial cultivation after a hard rain, about 1 to 2 days later, I'll come back and do it again. And that's where we can really start putting some dent in some weed growth as things dry out a little bit. So really have to hammer down on it for a few days after heavy rain like that. But if we stay on top of our game, we can easily get back control of things. Which means this upcoming week's going to be a pretty chill week out here in the garden. Yeah, we still got a few little weeds out there, but we're not going to be battling them like we were this past week because we have regained control. So this week, we're just out here making sure things have plenty of water, doing a little harvesting. We can enjoy our Memorial Day weekend and not worried about our garden being overgrown. So the moral of the story is, yes, you've got a pretty small window there to regain control, but don't give up, because you can get things under control again. Just got to hammer down for a few days, but you'll be glad you did. And now, as promised, let's check on these watermelons here, which haven't grown as much as they should have grown by now, but they're finally starting to take off. So all that rain really put a slowdown on my watermelons. Finally able to get things dried out a little bit, and they're finally greening up and starting to grow some. I was talking to my father-in-law the other day. He lives a couple counties away, and he actually has his on plastic, and he said he's already got like softball sized watermelons already, and we planted around the same time. So the plastic has definitely helped him out, because he's not got plants sitting on waterlogged soil, but thankfully mine's dried out some now. We should hopefully be able to catch up pretty soon. So we've got 4 rows in here and a mix of Cracker Jack seedless, Orange Crisp seedless, and then Sangria seeded as our pollinator. We planted these 2 rows first. That's why they look a little more grown than these rows. We like to stagger our watermelon plantings to kind of extend the harvest. So those should start producing first, and then these should come in behind them, give us a nice long window of watermelon production. Now these second 2 rows of plants that we planted, they were planted closer to all that rain than those were, and I have lost a couple of them. That's why you see it kind of spaced out so much there, but I still think we're going to have plenty of watermelon plants here to keep us happy. Now, I haven't fed these watermelons yet because it's just been too wet to do so, but today is the day I'm finally ready to put the juice to them. And if you recall back a month or so ago to one of our videos about feeding watermelons, in addition to things like squash, tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, one of those things that like frequent feeding. So we want to feed these pretty much the same way we do our tomatoes, squash, and cucumbers. And since our tomatoes are liking this program so much, we're going to give the watermelons the same thing. So the more I garden, the more I find myself just wanting to keep things simple. So instead of having a bunch of different programs for different plants, find one good program that works and just give them all that. So that's what we're doing here today. Going to use our Agar Thrive fruit and flower again, which we've been using on a ton of stuff this year. Just a little bit of that in there. And then really been liking this BugHut Plant Booster. So I'm going to put some of that in there. A few ounces of that. Helps defend against a lot of those bad soil pathogens. And then we're just going to put some water in there and get it mixed up. And just like we did with our tomatoes, we're going to take our little concoction here, and I'll probably do about half one of these pitchers around each watermelon plant. These plants aren't huge yet. I'm just going to carefully drizzle that around the plant there, around the base. I don't want to wash away a ton of soil. It's probably pretty good right there. We'll do this to every single watermelon plant we've got out here. All right, so we got all those fed, and I'll probably do that 1 to 2 more times if I can. So in a couple weeks, give them that same mixture there. And then about 3 to 4 weeks, if I can still get out there without stomping on a bunch of watermelon plants, I'll do it 1 more time. And then lastly, let's pivot from these watermelons right over here to this beautiful Nirvana sweet corn. Folks, this is the color your sweet corn plants should be. If they're not dark green like this, you probably didn't give them enough nitrogen. You might still get some corn, but it's not going to be necessarily optimal. You want these leaves as dark green as you can get them. Now this is my first time growing this Nirvana variety, and I think this may be the shortest sweet corn variety I've ever grown. Even to the tip of the tassel there, I don't think we have any stalks above 6 foot. So on average, most of this is around 4.5, 5 foot tall. These newer sweet corn varieties, a lot of them don't get very tall. If you think about it, these mature so fast, they don't have time to get very tall. Unlike an older variety like Silver Queen, which has a longer maturity date, gonna get a little taller. So we're in the pollination phase now. We've got silks everywhere. We've got tassels full of pollen. We've had plenty of wind, and we've got this planted thick enough we should get pretty decent pollination. Now I haven't seen a whole lot of worm damage so far, but I know how likely it is. So I've already sprayed this once with some of that Captain Jack spinosad, and I'll probably hit it again in another 4 or 5 days. So at this stage, it's all about making sure this corn has plenty of water. Yeah, our weeds did get out of control on us a little bit between those rows with all that rain, but I can't really fight it now. It's too thick in there. I'll deal with it when the corn is done. We've been running the drip about every other day for say 3 or 4 hours, keeping that soil nice and moist, keeping this corn happy, and we should do pretty good here the way this corn is looking so far. And one more important thing to note here, this corn didn't get a second round of nitrogen. I know I talked about that a few videos ago, but I never ended up doing it. So all this corn got was coop grow at planting, and then some of that Nature Safe 1300 when it was about 12 to 18 inches tall when we healed it. So not a ton of inputs to get this corn as green and healthy as it is, but we do have to give a lot of credit to the girls over there in the chicken tractor. Couldn't have done it without them. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I know we did a lot of bouncing around today, but hopefully I've inspired you to stay on top of things, even when things get hard, even when the weather doesn't cooperate. Not every week in the garden is going to require the same amount of work and effort. Some weeks you may have to really focus down and really grind, but the next week should be nice and easy. So it kind of goes in cycles. Just stay on top of things and you'll be glad you did. And as always, you can find the Agar Thrive fertilizer, the BugHut Plant Booster, and a lot of the other products we use around here on our website at lazydogfarm.com. And if you want to know more about our corn fertilization plan, watch this video right here. We'll break down a really easy 3-step plan to get your corn nice and green and healthy like ours is. So check that out, and we'll see you next time right here at Lazy Dog Farm.